It has been said that sacred geometry is the language of the universe, the building blocks with which the infinite intelligence constructs everything in creation, from the micro to the macro. Crystals as perfected geometric forms are a prime example of the underlying blueprint of balance, symmetry, and order. Does the geometry, the structure and shape of a crystal, give us clues in terms of what its metaphysical properties are? Can the ways in which crystals are formed by the earth tell us what they are best used for? Is there, for example, a best shape for processing grief, or attracting love, or manifesting abundance? And is there an ultimate, perfect form to optimize a crystal's energetic functions?
Scientists believe today that Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old. The first crystals began to form only 100 million years after Earth is believed to have originated at 4.4 billion years. So we know that because the oldest crystal that's been found now is a zircon crystal in Australia. And it is believed to have formed only 100 million years after the beginning of the planet that we live on. When we talk about these crystals in the immense age, there are so many different ways that they can form, and there are many different classifications. There are 32 crystal classes that are acknowledged in the scientific literature, and those classes are made from crystal systems, and there are 7.
These 7 are based on the actual lattice types of structures. So the lattice structure is a specific geometry that the atoms or molecules will arrange themselves around. And this type of geometry then determines the family or the sort of group of crystal types. For example, one of them is called triclinic, such as kyanite and turquoise. There's one that's called monoclinic. So for example, malachite and moonstone are monoclinic crystals. Another is orthorhombic, such as topaz and sulfur. There's rhombohedral, or sometimes rhombohedral is also called trigonal. So like calcite and ruby and sapphire are rhombohedral. And the hexagonal crystals are, for example, quartz, all the quartz crystals, and emerald is another example of a hexagonal. And sometimes they even form with 6 sides because of that hexagonal lattice structure. And then the final one is cubic, or sometimes they call it isometric. So for example, pyrite is cubic, and diamond is a particular type of cubic.
So each of these 7 crystal classes has many subclasses that are used, and it becomes very complex in terms of how the crystals are defined, the number of faces, the number of angles, the symmetry, the internal symmetry within the crystals themselves, all following very precise laws from a field of energy that we cannot see.
What's interesting about these forms is that they correspond to the elements. Now, the cube, which is the first of those forms, represents the earth. The octahedron, that represents the wind. The icosahedron, that represents the water. We have the tetrahedron, that represents fire. And we have the dodecahedron, that represents sacred sound. By visualizing these forms and encoding information and intention into them, we can create specific effects and amplify specific intentions. This demonstrates very clearly how the geometrically organized structure of the crystals is what is holding information, and that it's the information that we send forth that produces the healing.
Each of these geometries has a particular meaning, a particular energy of creation that they anchor. And to look at it as sacred is to recognize that these energies are coming from a divine mind all the way down into this physical manifestation. And we're recognizing that that form as being sacred in its origin.
The geometric shapes that make up crystal structures can be related to the 5-element system of Chinese medicine. The amorphous stones, which have no structure, can be associated with the fluidity of water, represented by the circle. The shape of the wood element is a hexagram and associated with the hexagonal crystal structure. Fire is represented by the triangle. The trigonal, triclinic, and orthorhombic structures all have the triangle as part of their shape. The square can be associated with the boundaries we have on Earth. It is found in the cubic crystal structure. Metal is represented by the rectangle. It has similar boundaries as the square, but its height and width give it a relationship to balance. The tetragonal crystal structure is associated with the rectangle. Each of these shapes relates to a particular temperamental nature, and crystal structure can have a profound effect on how we relate to the world. If our temperament works for us, that is, if we're happy with how we live life, great. If not, choosing stones based on crystal structures can help us make deep, lasting change.
Crystals form in many different ways. Some of them, for example, form in the rivers. You have some that form in the bellies of the mountains, where there's a lot of pressure that comes down from the mountain above it and around it. You might have heat coming in from the deeper layers of the earth, and this combination of pressure and heat compacts the crystals together, and like diamonds are formed that way, for example. You have in caves, you have the dripping of the water that comes down from above in the cave, and it creates stalactites, and then below, the stalagmites. There's many ways that the crystals can grow.
Crystals and stones are formed at different levels of the earth, which I call the level of formation. The level of formation of a stone is important because it gives us a clue about its best use. Generally, sedimentary stones are best for acute conditions affecting the surface energetics of the body. Sedimentary stones are usually relatively soft, so they have a quick effect, which we need for acute issues. Metamorphic stones are formed by the interaction of minerals that might not ordinarily meet. Change brings them together to form a new stone. They help us deal with our interactions with the world. Igneous stones, emanating originally from the core of the earth, resonate with our deepest issues, who we are as individuals. They can help us either challenge those parts of ourselves that cause us difficulty, or help us drive them more deeply into the anatomy, in which case they are held latent until we have the strength to confront them in this life or the next.
Many precious gems take hundreds of millions of years to form within the Earth. I believe the consciousness of the Earth, as well as the influence of other planets in the solar system, can be imparted into these gems. There's a growing market for lab-made gemstones, with many people insisting they work for astrology and healing, but I'm not so sure you can take this incredibly long, drawn-out process with the energy and participation of planet Earth being a critical component of it, speed it up in a lab, take the Earth's consciousness completely out of the equation, and still get healing benefits from these synthetic gems.
Beyond the level at which a stone was formed, igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary, knowing how and where a stone was formed is important to have a better understanding of how to use it. Obsidian is a good example. At some point in the very distant past, when the Earth was going through one of its tumultuous periods of change, superheated magma started building up under the crust of the Earth. More and more, the heat and the pressure intensified. And then a point of weakness in the crust began to give way. And all that magma was finally able to move from deep within the Earth up through the crust, and finally, still intensely hot and pushed by tremendous pressure, it burst up and out into the air. Suddenly, the very hot material was subjected to a very cold temperature. It was shocked by the cold. It changed from molten, liquefied, silica-rich material to glass. So what does this tell us about its use? Obsidian retains the energetic history of what happened to it and communicates that story to the body. It helps bring warmth from deep inside the body toward the surface. Because the stone was subjected to such radical change, it understands shock. When someone is acutely traumatized, their energy is in a state of stasis. It's like they're frozen. Holding obsidian will help move and warm their energy so that it can begin to circulate again. The stone has other uses as well, but almost all are somehow related to bringing energy to the surface of the body, which ultimately helps our immune system protect us. Obsidian is useful for acute conditions and for short periods of application.
Crystals come in all shapes, sizes, and price ranges, but no matter what the shape or size, all will possess the specific healing properties. From the humble, tumbled pocket stones to crystallized specimens, raw stones, to carved and embellished crystal forms, there is something for everyone. For crystal healers and placement on the body, cabochons are practical as they don't roll off the body so easily. Following the doctrine of signatures, we can receive clues about which organ, system, or chakra a mineral may be effective for by observing their unique structure, color ray, and shape. For example, if you look at this botryoidal malachite, how does it make you feel? It feels like it's bubbling out, and the bullseye pattern design brings us into the depths of its center. In crystal healing, malachite is an emotional Persia stone. The copper element increases conductivity as it penetrates and excavates deep emotions buried within the emotional body.